Okay, guys, so for today's SADY Simple series, we're going over the pre-list process. And I know this may not look super simple, and yet it is a simple template, simple way to make sure that you are preparing each of the things that you need each time you have a listing. And if you can sit down and come up with what steps you're going to take every time you take a listing, you're going to be able to find ways to either improve the order of those or look at ways that you can do stuff ahead of time to make yourself more efficient. And also, it's a good way to be able to figure out where you can delegate tasks as you either add an admin, hire a transaction coordinator or a listing coordinator to help with different things. So this is kind of the template, or this is the template that I utilized when I was listing properties. And some of this got more extensive as I added an admin and they were responsible for doing a lot of the things. But basically every time there was a new listing, I would come in and just take this and make and duplicate it and make another version of it and then rename that tab for the client. And then we were able to come through and highlight each task as it got done. And so that we knew and can communicate. So there was times where I knew I was listing a property next Wednesday afternoon. And prior to then, I could say, well, what things can I get done before I take this live? But let's walk through kind of what that pre-listing process was and in this template that I utilized for it. So step one was just prospect information capture. So whether that was an email because it was a referral, or if it was a lead that came into me via my website, or a phone call that came in on a sign, that kind of a thing, and then following up on that prospect. I would change it from prospect to lead once they identified that they were ready to actually make a purchase or sell their property. So at that point, I would use, and to explain a little bit, maybe I should stop and explain a little bit about this. So these different rows are different sections of the process. So I tried to kind of group things when they would take place. And then the responsible person piece was what I added when I had a team member, because then it was whether it was me, SADY, that did it, or my listing coordinator, it just made it clear who was responsible for it. I also included, which I don't know that you would need to do this necessarily immediately, but I included, again, this is a good building block, what website or what location it took place in. So whether it be the MLS or in Dropbox, or as you scroll down here too, there's Outlook, you'll see a number of times. And then finally, the last column, I would know if there was a form or a template that I used for that. Because again, that was just a way to communicate where to go look for it if there was a template to use. Okay, so under lead handling and process, I would say just use the seller pre-qualification form, which I know that we've gone over before. Lead assignment was due to being on a team. Is it a lead that I was going to handle, or was it a lead that I was going to give to an agent on the team? Sending a thank you note to the referral if applicable. So if somebody had referred them to me, I wanted to make sure that I sent out a thank you note. The next step was comp selection. So I would go into the MLS and I would select comps that were comparable based on the conversation I had had with that seller during that pre-qual form. I would create an MLS template or a contact and then add those comps to the cart for that MLS contact. I then would email my transaction coordinator or give them the paperwork or the form that I have for that intake form, and let them know what the property address was, what my high and low was for the estimated proceeds worksheet, and then any additional special information. At that point, these were all steps that before I had an admin, they would be what I would do. And that would be going in and adding a marketing brochure to the client presentation folder. So basically when I listed a property, and it came in and I was getting ready for that listing presentation, I had two folders. I had the client presentation folder that was delivered to them prior to the listing appointment. And then I also had a manila folder that was called, which was my folder. And so you'll see here that it's referencing two different, the agent folder and then the client presentation folder. So that's the two different ones. One was a nice, red envelope that I would put in a or red folder that I would put in a big white envelope and deliver ahead of time. But my step was to make sure I had a marketing brochure in there, that I created a Dropbox folder under that using the naming convention in my file storage, online file storage for that client. And then we would create and add a cover letter using the cover letter template and add that to the client presentation. And it was really a template. So on the initial part of it, we would change the address and their name. And then we would just print it and I would sign it and we would put that in the client presentation folder. Next would be, and the process that you would want to just go through is coming down and figuring out, okay, what is it that I need to do every time I take a new listing? So creating the comp spreadsheet, which was what I used as my comps for like a CMA, printing that and adding it to the spreadsheet to the client presentation folder, and then also one separate to my Manila folder so that I had a copy to review just prior to going into the appointment. Then creating the market analysis, which was the spreadsheet was just a spreadsheet version of all those comps. And then the actual market analysis was like with the pictures and there was a different process. So I had instructions for how to do both of those.
Elizabeth, why did you do the spreadsheet of the comps and then created like a comp analysis? To me, it seems like it would be doing the same thing, but in two different ways. So what was the purpose of each way?
Yep, you mean to show you some examples?
If you don't mind, please.
Yeah, let me show you.
I mean, obviously you do it for an intelligent reason, but I don't know what it is.
Yeah, so the difference would be, this is the comp spreadsheet, and it looked like this, where sometimes it was easier for me to get people to write that it was an easy spreadsheet version to where I could talk to them about how here's the price per square foot. Look, I'm showing you comps that are all split levels that are similar to yours. These all have like the number of garages. It's a little easier to look at the comps in a spreadsheet format and talk about days on market when they were all kind of stacked together. I also used this spreadsheet in the sense that I would have the range that I was providing them. For this couple, I told them I thought their house would sell between $238,000 and $248,000. And so I could break down the price per square foot in the spreadsheet version. And then I could say, okay, see, and I feel like we are with the quality of your property and with you having a 3-car garage versus most of these having 2-car, I feel like we're in that right range. So I'm in the ballpark here. But this was one tool for those that it was it was just easier for me to point to those and handles any objections on price, because I could use it real easy to say, hey, no, I'm already comparing you to, others that are 3 bedrooms, 2.5 bath, similar square footage, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure.
Let me show you what this market analysis looked like. So my market analysis, this was the cover sheet that I just changed every time to have their name. And then I had more of like it was like a printed booklet and I bound it. And so in this, I would then have a map so where we could, if they were like, what about that one that was like 2 streets over? And then I also would then include the photos for the other properties. So like this property was actually similar floor plan to theirs. So we could go through kind of more of the pictures. So this was where I would go to say, oh, sometimes we'd be looking at this spreadsheet and they'd want to talk about one specific one and be like, well, why did this one sell for so much? And then I could grab their bound picture and flip through it and be like, because look, it's all white and gray. It's got a brand new kitchen. That's why, or whatever it might be, right? So I really enjoyed having both of those tools, and yeah, they were kind of different. I like them being separate, right? Because then we could use them together.
Right.
So that would be, does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Okay. So then basically this is just literally every step. And again, if it was you, you may not break it down every step, but I think that it was helpful just because it takes time to print it out and bind it and put it in and to know where to put it in. And building the standard operating procedures out, it made it really easy to train, as my team grew and such. So then this is creating the market analysis and printing it out. I also always put in the MLS tax record into my folder and saved it to Dropbox because it's something that we have to put in for compliance. And the same thing with the old MLS sheet. And I liked having those on hand to reference if they're like, how much did we pay for this? So the next step was creating the listing agreement paperwork. That was something also that went out with my listing presentation. I created and printed all of the listing documents and sent them out, had them in that listing client folder that went out ahead of the appointment. This was where I was very specific in the order that I wanted things in that client presentation folder, so I just spelled it out here. I did include a seller's estimated proceeds worksheet that went out ahead of time, and it's set on top and then paper clipped together, and this order is how the rest of the paperwork went. I also included, added a copy of the estimated proceeds to my folder. And then this was just talking about the delivery of it. Again, creating an Outlook contact if it didn't already exist. And then I have, when I would go to a listing, I had my little folder, my little yellow sheet. So this is just instructing to not forget to put that in there. Because the times I'd get to an appointment and didn't have it, I'd be super flustered. Next step was checking availability of the stager and adding that to this yellow initial home assessment form. I also checked with my photographer and added that availability to that form. And then appointment confirmation to call or text. So this was an important step just to make sure that I didn't drive all the way out to Lee Summit to meet with the Flippins and then go, oh shoot, I completely forgot we have an appointment. We're not home right now. So then once at the listing appointment, I would finish and fill out this yellow initial home assessment form. I would finalize the listing agreement paperwork with the seller and hopefully get them to sign it. There were times that if everybody's stomach was growling and I trusted those clients, I wouldn't get signatures the night of, but that was always a goal. And then I would use this form to capture what contractor contact info I would need. And so I would then, after their listing appointment, email out the contractor contact info within 24 hours. And then also mail out a thank you card to the sellers for having me, come and meet with them and the opportunity to sell their home. The other thing that I added, this was something I added over time and through experience. At this point, in our conversations at the listing presentation, I would have talked to them about if they were not already enrolled in a seller sewer line home warranty, to put them in, get them enrolled in a sewer line warranty. Mostly because I worked in an older part of town that we had a lot of sewer issues, and those sewer line warranties sometimes don't take effect for 30 days. So I always wanted, if it wasn't in place and we were going to be getting their house ready for the market, to go ahead and get the clock ticking so that they could get enrolled in that and we could use it if we needed to during inspections. Okay, so then under the next section here was just updating my paperwork checklist with what paperwork had been signed. And then if it wasn't completed, requesting that from the sellers and working on getting it signed. This is just a matter of scanning and processing those paperwork again, and that's what my listing coordinator would take care of. This is just a little checkpoint in, and again, like a lot of times when you have one listing, it's not a big deal. It's when you start to get 2 or 3 listings going and you're prepping those, and you got maybe where over a 2-month period, you might be prepping 3 different listings or 4 different listings, and it's kind of hard to keep track of where you are on all of them. That's where it was really helpful to have all of them kind of spelled out down here at the bottom, and you could see. So my admin liked to hide all of the rows that had been completed once they'd been completed. But anyhow, so then we would email additions, check in on the status of repairs. A lot of times sellers would say, hey, we're going to paint this and we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And as you got closer, their ability to do all of those things was not what they thought. And so sometimes they'd say, hey, could you go ahead and give us a name for someone to stain the deck, because we're not going to have time to do it. So that was part of checking in on them on the status of things. Sometimes I would go ahead then and email additional contact info for contractors, or schedule repairs and improvements if I was going to help with that. If it was like, hey, I can just go ahead and I'll call my guy and get him out there for you and help with that stuff, because I know you've got a lot on your plate getting your house. That was often a time too where we would need to send out and they'd ask about the cleaning company info if I had a house cleaner that I would recommend. So we added that as a step. We also added it as kind of a proactive step to offer it to people to say, hey, I do have a great house cleaner that would be happy to come in and help take care of that part. You'll find when you're listing properties, people, it's so much work for people to get their house ready. And then to then have to like deep clean all of it. Sometimes there's a lot of work. And then some of them needed a lot of deep cleaning. So we often would just recommend that. Next is just capturing, again, this is like a lot of detail, but there's so many different things when you list a property. It was really helpful to have it all gathered here so that we could run through and keep track of it. So obtaining the key and garage door code if applicable, scheduling the staging appointment. So if and then attending the staging appointment. So again, some of these tasks would go really quick and maybe there wasn't a lot of improvements, but so scheduling the staging appointment, attending the staging appointment, and then reviewing the staging report. So sometimes I would only attend the staging appointment if it was necessary for me to attend it. Maybe it's because there's an emotional seller that needed the emotional support, or if it was a seller that maybe it was a little intense and I wanted to be supportive for the stager. But lots of times my stager and I knew each other well enough, and she knew, you know, my expectations for and how my clients kind of were typically, that she could go on her own. So then I often then at that point would be reviewing the staging report to make sure I could provide any input that I have on what they really needed to do or maybe what they didn't need to do. And then I would follow up with the clients after that. The next step was creating and printing the feature cards that I would put up around the house that would just state, you know, what is it that, let me see if I've got their feature. So I would put up these little feature cards around the house to point out all of the wonderful things about the house. So these are obviously like older, but I would print those out and prepare those, and then schedule the photo appointment and then email the client instructions for the photo appointment. So I did have email templates for that. Attend the photo appointments, create final staging tweaks, post those feature cards. We tried to, this was again where we were trying to find ways to be more efficient. And we realized that if we would have those, and that's good too, like by creating a list of everything you're gonna do, you're able to then in time learn that maybe if I move this step up in the process, I can be more efficient and it saves me a trip. And so that's kind of what happened. We realized that if we could get those feature cards done prior to the photo appointment, that we could actually take them and put them up at the photo appointment and not have to go back to the house at a separate time to do so. So this is posting feature cards at the photo appointment or following visit. The next step is once you get those photos back from the photographer, I highly suggest that you go through the photos and renumber them into an order that makes sense and that flows well for the property. So that's what this step kind of was for me, was to go through and renumber the photos so that it made sense and you were flowing through the house properly. Next was following up on and discussing pet instructions for showings. So for example, removing them or creating them, but making sure that that conversation has occurred with the sellers. Collecting and recording showing instructions. That's another step in the listing process. So it's what notice do they want for showings? Do they need a 2-hour notice? Do they need a 4-hour notice before showings can come? And then also your timing. So no showings before 9 a.m., no showings after 8 p.m., gathering that kind of information. Next, an obvious one, but one that you also, it's so many times if you didn't have it in a fashion that you were reminded, but delivering the sign and lockbox. Writing the MLS remarks. So in the MLS, the section, that paragraph of stuff, this was one where I had an admin, she would have everything else ready and she'd be like, we're all ready to go for next Wednesday. I just need you to write the remarks. Should be a really big line. Super not fun to write those remarks sometimes. Some people love it. Okay, so then write MLS photo descriptions. So again, I was an agent that really liked to go kind of above and beyond and be detail oriented. And so when I would order those photos and reorder them into a way that it made sense, I also would open up a Word doc and then I would create photo descriptions for each photo. And so in those, I'm pointing out things like newly refinished hardwood floors. Every bedroom has a ceiling fan, is upgraded with a ceiling fan, but I was finding ways to love on that house in each photo. And those photo remarks do carry over through the IDX to other sites. But it was just a way to go kind of the extra mile and make sure my clients knew that I was doing all I can to make sure to show off all of the great features of the house. Create the virtual tour dollhouse photo. So I used Matterport and would take a screenshot of the Matterport in the dollhouse view so that I could upload that with the other photos so people knew that it had a Matterport and they should go look at it in the virtual tour link. And the same with creating the floor plan view from that Matterport. It was another step, which again sounds silly to have broken out, but it is another step that you've got to remember to do so that when it's time to go in the MLS, you've got it all ready and prepped. The next step was creating a disclosure cover sheet. And that is like where you see when you're viewing properties and you're showing properties that they have a cover sheet that covers, let me see if we've got it in here, guys. Yep, here we go. So this was my disclosure cover sheet. So I would go in and have this, and this is again something that you could create far in advance to the listing date, just so that the day it goes live in MLS, it's not one thing you're scrambling to do at the end. But on here, I would just have, obviously you guys have seen this when you've been showing properties and such, but that's what this is referencing there. And then verifying the seller's disclosure is completed, and then I would add it to the disclosure packet so that it was all here together, and then make it into one document so it all went into the MLS together.
Do you find it's easier to have everything in one document as opposed to having separate documents? I know some agents do one way, some agents do the other. What do you find that's been convenient through your experience and things like that?
I think it's better to have one document, Jason, because it forces them if they want, and I named it the disclosure packet because then when I uploaded under supplements and MLS, it was clear that's the seller's disclosure. And think about it, what is it that they want? They want the seller's disclosure. And so I liked having it all together because it reduced the chances of that agent not seeing that I already had a disclosure cover sheet that had all the information they needed. So I liked having it all together. I tried to be kind and not make it something that would be an ink sucker when they printed it out to where, you know what I mean? I tried not to make it like a black page with white writing so that it was messing up somebody's printer if they were printing out disclosures and such, but I liked having it all together. And I also, guys, would have it all together. Do you see we've got seller's disclosure here and the franchise disclosure? This house was built after 1978, so there's no lead-based paint. But I liked having it all together too with all of the disclosures together because it increased the chances of them including all of them when they sent over an offer.
Cool.
Is this helpful, guys?
Yeah, thank you.
Create SADY page. So this is like creating, I would have a landing page on my personal website for each listing I listed. So that too was something I often would prep ahead of time and just not take live until the day we went live in the MLS. So that would kind of create like that would take care of all of the stuff I could do. So everything in this pre-list day process section was all stuff that my goal was to have it done prior to the day that we're taking it live in MLS. Now, sometimes guys, I like to like press and go as fast as possible. Sometimes we would be doing some of these pre-list date preparations the day of because I would be just waiting on photos. Otherwise everything else was ready to go. So there was definitely sometimes where I would be doing some of this stuff the same day, but most of this stuff was stuff I was trying to get done prior to going live in the MLS. So then once it was go time, it was the day we were listing the property. I had then where we would need to enter the listing in MLS, which is another thing you can do and save as a, in your section under input, you can save to drafts basically. And then once you've taken it live in MLS, you can upload your photos, your photo remarks, upload your disclosures under the supplemental material to MLS supplements. You then needed to enter the listing and showing time. I will point out, guys, there was, when we were using CSS, there was the opportunity to create one ahead of time. I felt like it was always really wonky in connecting it to the real one that I never opted to do that. I would just kind of make it a part of the Fast Fury after you hit go in the go in MLS and submitted it. This little piece here was where I would use, I would identify the reverse prospecting agents list, and then I had a little tool that would make it to where it was easy for me to email out something to each one of them to let them know that this just listed and to check it out. Okay, this is something I was doing back in 2016, but I would create a teaser video of the virtual showing. So of the Matterport, I would click through and create a video for some buzz. And then this is where I'm emailing all the reverse prospects. Creating the listing flyer. Again, the listing flyer would be mostly all created with the photos and with the address and that information, but I wouldn't have the MLS number until I entered it in MLS. And so I would have to put that on the front of the flyer. And then on the back of the flyer, I typically would have the printout. Let me see if I have. Here's the flyer. So this was a template, guys, that I just would go in and change out each time. And so I would just change out the photos and address. And then on the back, I had to wait till it was listed in MLS so that I could print this out and include it on the back. By including that standard, you guys laughing at me? Oh. Sorry. And then it was nice that it had the room measurements and that kind of a thing in the back. So that's why it would had to be kind of later in the process. And again, by having it all spelled out, it was much easier for me to figure out what order things had to go in order to be the most efficient. Create the info packet. So I'm just gonna love how I had so many different packets. Okay, so that was the disclosure packet. I have, this was probably, oh, see, this is where I used to have different stuff. So I used to do a packet, this is because I've changed processes. I used to have where I would create a booklet of all of the pictures and then slide the seller's disclosure inside that. So that's what it was talking about there. And I don't think I did that for the flip-ins, partly because it was go time. Okay. Then it was just making sure it posted to the SADY.com and capturing that link. And then I would share the post for the listing on my Facebook page. And then consider if I was going to do a sponsored ad of the listing post, that reminded me there to do that. And then I have that email template, MLS Go Live, that I emailed out to sellers. So that's what was included here on this last line. So that was pretty much the process for getting a property listed, like from the moment they called me all the way up to we're live in the MLS and ready for showings. Obviously, too, guys, like I am a freak and that, no, I have everything else kind of spelled out below that as well, but we can pause there. Are there any questions I can help answer?
So all of the virtual stuff and the layouts, that is all via Matterport?
For the virtual, yes. Like what I'm referencing that here, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm trying to, I believe we did a Matterport for these guys. If not, I can find a different one.
Because I've never done like a Matterport, so like what?
Like how to do that?
Yeah, like we can another time, obviously, but.
Yeah, I was gonna say, let me see if I can find something for you that was a Matterport. These guys. Oh, that's their purchase. Just kidding. Oh my gosh, you guys, it makes me so sad. Okay, closed transactions. That's what we're looking for. This is a good one. I know I did Matterport for this one. So basically, and I don't like you have to have an active Matterport, but like while you're in you've clicked on those, right, Jason?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I've clicked on them. Yeah.
Okay, so what I would basically do when I would click on it, I would then select that and make it a Dollhouse view. So I would have it selected on Dollhouse, and then I would just do a screen capture so that they could see it look like this, where it was like, oh, and now like with everything that's gone on, people are quite aware of what Matterports are. And then on it, I would just click on the virtual tour link to view a 3D virtual tour walkthrough, a dollhouse view, and a floor plan view. So often I would try to like do it in an air, like a way that was like nice. This is like the entry to this house.
So do you build that with, do you build the Mad report within MLS, or do you build it like separately and then upload it to MLS?
So Matterport would be like what your it's got a special camera and like photographer would do, and they'll send you a link that you can copy and paste that into the virtual tour spot. And
okay.
But I would click on that link and it would bring the Matterport up, and then I would do a screenshot. And the purpose of creating this, Jason, was that would be in my photos that I would do, and you can probably see here. This was back when we weren't able to put a gazillion photos, but I would include it as one of my photos. So you can see I have 24, and the reason I had 24 is we could only have 25 at the time. And so the 25th photo I would have uploaded that Matterport. So this was a really, really big house. On houses that were smaller, I would also include these that were like the floor plan layout, so they could see the floor plan. Like this is the first floor, living room, kitchen, eat-in area. This was like supposed to be the dining room. A lot of people in that area had it as the dining room. My clients changed it and made it an office, and then this the dining room. But that was just me also trying to get bang for my buck out of those Matterports, because they can be like a little pricey. So then this was the basement. They had a full bath here, a bedroom, living room, and then another, like, it was interesting.
Cool.
But yeah, that's what that was.
Excuse me, who did the photo, Elizabeth? You did, or you hired somebody?
Did the photos? Who did my photos? My photo, perfect spot for you did my photo. Would do my photos and the Matterport for me. But see, like when they would send them to me, and that's what I mean too. So when they would send them to me, they would be, and like, this is how they would come to me, and see how they're in like this random order. It was like the order the photographer walks through the house. So I would go in and reorder them into something that made sense, which is like, we walk in, here's the front of the house, here's the living room. So you're kind of walking through each of the rooms. Yeah. That was a great time of year to sell the house. I sold that house twice. Those clients I've bought and sold with me twice. No. Yeah. And both times I had to sell their houses, I had to sell them more than once.
How twice, Elizabeth? Maybe 2 times?
First time a Chiefs player came, or Chiefs coach came in and like made this big baller offer, and oh yeah, he so badly wanted it. Da, 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 da. And inspections, man, like canceled on me. I was so full. Resold it to one of the other originally interested buyers, so it worked out just fine. But yeah, good times. Good times. Any other questions, guys? I know this is super complex. And so again, like think simple and start literally with just, okay, what are the different steps I'm going to do each time I list a property? And note that that will make it so much easier when it's time to list a property, because there's just a lot of moving parts. I mean, down to like printing stuff off and driving over and dropping it off at the property with the sign and the lockbox. Like all of that becomes one big jumbled mess when you're just kind of doing it by the seat of your pants, and or you hate it when the client asks you, hey, are you gonna can you send me a link to it on your website? And you're going, oh, actually, hold on, I don't know that I actually did that yet. So just again, and figuring out when you can do stuff sooner rather than later. All right. Any other questions on listing, guys? That was kind of the pre-listing process.
The only question I have is off topic, so if no one else has one.
Yeah, here, and I'll stop. Let me stop recording.